this, but without creating a new room. All right, I think we're recording. Okay, so CS250. So those of you who haven't been here to see me, welcome. Chris Lane, your professor, is unable to meet with you live for this week because of family reasons. It's pretty hard, actually. And so you are welcome to come to my class, and which is at this time. And if you're unable to come at 11:45, this recording will be posted on your Moodle page, or I'll email you. Okay, just so you know, Professor Lane has given me permission to edit the Moodle page, which I will be doing. So I will be posting the video for this class in the afternoon. I will also be the one who's going to administer the quiz for you on Friday. Okay, and so I'll be there when you take the quiz. I'll talk about that in just a second. But I also wanted to offer up for those of you, again, in Professor Lane's section, just the same as I do with my section, my office hours, if you need to come for questions. So I will post details for how you do that. Okay, to sign up for my office hours, so come for questions there. Okay, and even if you're not here right now from Professor Lane's section and you're watching the recording, it applies to you too. Okay, so that's section 2. My name, by the way, is Shireen Koja. So nice to meet you. Come see me. It's all fine. I will take over this week. Okay, we by the way, Professor Lane and I, we basically cover the same things. Okay, the same material. We would give the same kinds of quizzes and everything else. Okay, so you should be pretty similar experience, though obviously the way we teach is very different. All right, so that's one I wanted to say. By the way, yeah, those of you again who don't know, just any questions you have, just go ahead and put them in the chat. I have my chat open right here, and you can also unmute and talk to me if you need to. Okay, sounds good. All right, so then just reminders. So the quiz is on Friday, and it's going to be synchronous, which is just a fancy way of saying it's going to be during class time. Okay, so just show up to class on Zoom like you normally do. And what you're going to do is you're going to get a PDF with a list of questions. And you can print that PDF out if you want to, or you could just have it up on your screen. And then what you're going to do is either write on that piece of paper or on a separate piece of paper the answers to each of the questions. Make it as clear as possible that you're answering question 1, part A. Here's my answer. Question 2, part A, part B, and so on. Okay, draw lines if you can between each of the sections. Don't try to skimp on paper. I've had that happen in the fall a little bit, where it's like you try to fit everything in a small space, but then it doesn't leave much room for me to write comments. And sometimes the writing gets very squished. Okay, so try and use the paper you have. Okay, and then what you're going to do is take a picture of that, save it to a PDF, and upload it to Moodle, just like you have done in CS150. And if you haven't done that before, let me know and I can give you a little instructions, but it's not too complicated. Okay. So that's for the quiz. I was trying to think if there was something else I wanted to say. There is a review on Moodle. So if you go to Moodle, which I have here, you'll see that there is a review listed as practice problems. Okay, so make sure that you look at that. The exam, the quiz is not going to cover the stuff that we're doing with classes, the object stuff, the class, the object, the member variables, and all that sort of things. Okay, that's going to be covered in the next exam. Okay, but instead, this exam is going to cover arrays, 1D and 2D arrays, character stuff like you did with the assignment, and what else did we do? And files. That's right. Reading and writing to and from files. Okay. And then last thing I want to say about the exam is when you do sign on, I need to have your cameras on during the exam. And what I want you to do is just have it so I can see your face while you take the exam. Okay. If you have any issue with cameras or turning them on, let me know. All right. Any questions? All right, very good. Assignment. All right, so assignment. Now, because Professor Lane needed to, and I think it's a good idea to give you the extra weekend anyway, the assignment is now due on Monday. I'll write it down. Due on Monday during class time. So be sure to turn it in. I have looked at, so for my section, I haven't looked at it with Professor Lane's section, but I've looked at what you turned in on Monday. So, and I've actually run all your code. I'm just going to go give you feedback on the PDFs. Just a couple of reminders, okay? Some people did not turn anything in. So you're going to get 0 out of 4 points for that stuff on Monday. So the whole assignment is worth 30 points. If you didn't turn anything in on Monday, you've lost 4 points already. All right, so it's very important you turn in the code. You turn in the assignment. Secondly, the assignment has got to be turned in 2 parts, right? There's going to be 2 things you've got to turn in. You've got to turn in the actual Visual Studio project, if you can, okay? And that you can turn in, so I'm going to put here, it's a like code. So you got to turn in both the Visual Studio project and the PDF of your code, right? The Visual Studio project, you can do it in one of 2 ways. You can either turn it into GitHub, okay? Or you can turn it into as a zip file on Moodle, all right? Now, this is just, again, reminder, just for this particular assignment. The next assignment is going to have to be Visual Studio, and it's going to be on GitHub, okay? Okay, questions on the assignment?
For Lane's class, the submissions are a little wonky right now.
Okay.
He duplicated or it looks like he duplicated the submission.
Okay.
And everything got moved to the Part B submission for Part A.
Okay.
And to resubmit in Part A isn't possible right now.
Right. So submit it for Part B, right? So so the next one, just submit it for Part B, and that's okay. Okay. Yep. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how he's managing that. I didn't bother with the Part A and Part B. I'm just having you submit in one form or one particular form. Okay. Thanks for the question. All right, and we do have office hours available still. So there's office hours for me, which I'll post for Professor Lane's section. I still have openings, and then tutoring. So there's tutoring Thursday 6 to 8 p.m. and Sunday 6 to 8 p.m. Okay. All right. So that is business done. I'm going to move on to today. All right, so today we're going to do 2 things. I'm going to very briefly go over the rectangle class, which we talked a little bit about and worked through some of the questions last time. And I'm going to introduce rectangle class, and I'm going to introduce constructors. All right, you don't know what they are, that's fine. I'm going to introduce the idea of constructors, okay? Then I'm going to break you up into breakout rooms. You're going to work in pairs. So you will work in pairs basically on your own class, okay? And the directions are going to be all on Moodle, and I'll tell you more about that as well. All right, and my goal is to give you 30 to 40 minutes working in pairs, okay? All right. So where did I want to go? So let's move on. So what I'm going to do to introduce, just kind of do a quick reminder before I set you loose on your writing your own class. Okay. So we talked about classes, and we worked a lot with the person class, but what we haven't done is work, you haven't sort of built your own and work with this rectangle class, right? And so just as a reminder, again, I'm just very briefly going to go over things. This thing over here is called UML. So this is a description of what the class holds. It's just a visual representation of what we have in the class. Just because I have it here doesn't mean it shows up in the code. This is just for humans. It's not for the computers. What the UML shows us is it shows us the name of the class at the top. The next part here are the variables, which I'm going to write it down because we use different terminology. So we call these member variables, We also call them data members. And I think that's all we do. So I think those are the only two basic names that we refer to those items, okay? And then the next part over here, the next box down, these are our functions, okay, which are also called methods, okay, depending on the programming language. Sometimes they call them functions, sometimes they call them methods. And in this here example, because they're part of the class, we call them member functions, right? So they're called member functions. And you'll probably hear me and Professor Lane and all your other CS professors, as you take more CS, kind of interchangeably use the names for these things. So somebody will call them methods, somebody will call them functions, okay? But they basically mean the same thing. Okay, then we have this minus and this plus. It's not always the case that your minuses are on top and your pluses are down below, but the minuses indicate that the data here is private, or that these members are private, and the pluses mean these members are public, okay? And then the functions that we have, we start right away with the name of the function. Notice the different format, right? So I'm gonna do this in red so you can see. So here, right, if you look at this function in the UML, and I'm just going to show you the function in the code, and what you'll notice is the way it's written, it's just syntax, it's just the way people are organizing it. If you start with the name of the function, so the name first, so we forget about this void for now, we're just going to jump to the name of the function and write that first. The plus, like I said, indicates that we're under public. Then in parentheses, we have our parameters, and what we do is we just write the double. We don't bother with the name. And then we add this colon, and then we put the return type. So this void represents the void that we have over here. And that's just the syntax for UML, okay? So if somebody ever gives you some sort of UML, right, which you will get if you take any more CS, what you're doing is you're going to transcribe that UML into code, and that's how you read the UML, okay? Okay, questions so far? Okay, so far this is everything that we've covered before. We do have this thing called const after some of these functions. And as a reminder, what the const means is that these functions, the get length, get width, calculate area, calculate perimeter, are not allowed to modify the data members, okay? Or the member variables, all right? So remember, we said that these functions, even though we're not passing in any parameters, right? We're not passing in anything inside of these parameters, they have access to our data because they're all wrapped up in this class. And so because of that, they have access to the data, but as designers, as the class designers, we're saying, actually, you function, all you're going to do is return the length that's stored, and you're not allowed to modify it, okay? Okay. Any other questions? I'll give you just 30 seconds to write something in the chat. I just erase some of this stuff.
Are we asking questions in the chat, or did you ask a
Yeah,
question?
whatever. If you have questions, I haven't asked a question yet. I'm just asking if you have questions. Okay, I'm going to assume we're good. Now on to the new stuff. All right. Oh, actually, before I step to the new stuff, just a reminder, we got 3 files, right? Rectangle.h, that's where we have just the blueprint, the definition of our class. Then we have another file called rectangle.cpp, which includes rectangle.h. And that is where we write, I'm just going to look at set length because that's the one we've been looking at. We write the definition of the function, and we use the scope resolution operator and the name of the class. And that way we can set the data. So in this case, set length, I'm passing in the length and setting it, okay? Now, if you just have your rectangle.h, your rectangle.cpp, you've got code, but you've never used it, right? Every C++ program needs a main, and the main is where things start running. Okay, so here's our main. And the first thing that happens inside our main is we're declaring I say declaring a variable, that's not the right technical term. We're instantiating an object, which is just a fancy way of saying creating an object, which is a fancy way of saying creating a variable, but we're instantiating an object of type rectangle, okay? So that's what's happening over here, okay? And so when the main program runs, we go straight into here, we create an object. Now, this is the new part. The new part is when I've created this object, the first thing that ever gets called is something named a constructor. And this is the part, this is the constructor right here. So I'm gonna cover that and I'm gonna show you that this part here is our constructor. And so what is a constructor? It's like, it's a default function. Let me write it somewhere. So what is a constructor? Question mark. It is a default function that is called whenever an object is created. And by created, I mean instantiated. Whenever I create an object, I instantiate an object, the constructor is what's going to get called. The other, another thing to notice about constructors is they have no, they're like a function, right? Sort of function is, but it's not really a function because there's no return type, right? So function has no return type. And then the other thing that it has, that it has to be very specific, same name. We can't name it whatever we want. So same name as the class. And I'm going to say those are the basic 3 things that you need to know about constructors at this point. Okay, we can spend a whole day or 2 days on constructors. And in fact, in my advanced OO class, we'd spend a lot of time on constructors. But for now, that's the basics that you need to know. So let's double check and see that we have that. If you look, rectangle is the same name as the class rectangle. So every constructor has the same name as the class. There's no return type, right? So no return type. Constructors do not return anything. Okay, their job is to create, construct, so they don't actually return anything. They're a special thing. And then what we pass in, we can decide to pass in whatever we want, but usually what it is something that will initialize your data. So if I look at my member variables, I have an M length and an M width. They're 2 doubles. And so what I'm going to pass in are 2 doubles. All right. Now, if the user doesn't pass in a double, what do we want to do? I've decided as the designer of this is I'm going to set it to 0. Okay. So I'm going to set it to 0. So if in other words, if the user doesn't pass in one of these variables, then what it will do is it will initialize M length and M width to 0. Okay. Okay, so there's some questions in here about what is a return type and all this sort of thing. So let me kind of clarify, right? If I have a function called setWidth, okay, I'm just trying to think how to explain this. If I think of let me do it this way. So if I think about a general function, okay, I'm going to add a new page here. Okay, so let's just think about how do you know something is a function? Okay. What identifies a function? A function has a return type, right? And it has a name or an identifier. It has an open parentheses, and then it has parameters, which are separated by commas, right? So comma separated parameters, and then that's it. You can make it const or not a const, okay? If I think about an example, we can look from the previous one. We had a void, a set width, or something, set length. I passed in a double, I think it was. Maybe I called it width, okay? And that's it, right? And so the void here indicates that this function is not returning anything, okay? A constructor is special in that there is no return type and the name has to be the same as the class. So this has to be, I'm going to write it down as class name. So it has to have exactly the same name as the class, and it can have parameters, again, in the same way as regular functions and semicolon. So there's never a return type. It's not even returning void. It's just nothing. There's no return type. It's a constructor, okay? Does that make sense? I think that helps clarify a little bit. All right. All right, there's another question on here. So member functions are public and member variables are private. So going back to the public private, it's not necessary that functions are always public and data is always private. You'll see example as you go through, you'll see lots of examples of different classes, and you'll see that sometimes I actually want some functions to be private, and sometimes I might want some data to be private. So they're two separate issues. It just happens that majority of the time, you're going to have functions being public and data being private, okay? Constructors are always public. All right, I'm going to write them. I write that down with my qualities of constructors here. So default function that's called whenever an object is created, no return type, same name as the class. And I'm going to say always public. Okay. Because what is the purpose of a constructor? The purpose of the constructor is to take control over what the class is going to look like. There's a quick question here. I'm going to flip back. I presume you wanted this page. Okay, so I'll leave that on just for a second. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to talk about what is the purpose of the constructor. The purpose of the constructor is to initialize our variables. What it does is it sort of goes into memory, allocates whatever space I need. If I have an object that takes 2 doubles, I'm going to allocate enough space for 2 doubles. If an object that needs an array and some other stuff, I'm going to create allocate space for that. Okay. So let's look at how this might work. When is the constructor called? It is called right here. So I'm going to erase here. Okay. And show you that, all right, when I say rectangle cbook, what it's going to do, and this is just in memory where you don't really see it, but it just helps visualize it, right? But if you follow the compiler, cbook will say, oh, you're of type rectangle. I'm going to jump to the constructor for rectangle, okay? Because how do I create a rectangle? I don't know. I know you want to create a rectangle called cbook, but how do I create it? I don't know. I'm going to look at the constructor, right? So it's going to create this cbook, and it's going to jump to the constructor. Now up here, the constructor, that's just the prototype, right? So remember the definitions are down below. So this is the prototype. There's my definition. It looks weird because you do rectangle, rectangle. It's okay, just the way it is, okay? So you're gonna jump over to rectangle, and it's gonna take that 45 and copy it into, and here I'll draw my lines. 45 gets copied into the L, and the 54 gets copied into the W, right? And inside of here, right, cbook is an object that has M length, because that's my data, and it has an M width. And what it does is it copies over the 45 into the length, and the 54 into the M width, okay? Notice that it can access M length and M width, even though they're private inside of the class, but this constructor is part of the class, so it can just access it directly, okay? And that's the basics of how a constructor is called. All right, I'll let that sink in for a minute while you kind of write some questions, and I'll read the questions that are up here. I think I answered your question, Taylor. Okay. Okay, I'm going to show one more example before I let you loose on some code. I can try that stuff. So all it did was set the M length and the M width to those values that were passed in. All right, so let's look at another example. Let's say, I'm going to erase here. I want to create a different kind of object. Yeah, get rid of this stuff. So if I wanted to create a different object, maybe I want to say rectangle C page, I don't know, something, okay? A different rectangle. And I pass in one number, 35, for example, okay? Then what that's going to do inside of memory is it's going to allocate space for C page. I'll try and make it a little bit bigger. So C page is also going to have an M length and an M width. But in this case, I've only passed in one number. I only passed in 35. So 35 is going to get passed into the L, which gets passed into the length. And because I didn't pass anything else, it's going to set that W to 0 because my default values up here are 0 and 0. So it will set your width to 0 and your length to 35. Okay. All right. Last thing. Once you've got your objects, you can call those functions, all these public functions I can call on the object. So down here, I say cbook dot calculate area, and that will call my calculate area function on cbook. And so it will use those numbers of 45 and 54 yeah, calculate the area using that and return it. Okay. Okay, question. Let's see. Is cpage an object? Yep. We just created an object. Same way we created cbook, I created cpage. These are both objects, and this is the name of the class. And in both cases, I called the constructor. Okay. So it's just what I said. It has only one variable because I'm allowed to just pass in one because of this equals 0. So I could pass in 0 or 1 or 2 variables. If I have nothing in there, it will set them both to 0. If I have 1, it will set the second one to 0. And if it has 2, it will set them both to whatever was passed in. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to let you loose. I'm going to just show you what I'm going to work on. Is you're going to work on this rectangle class. I've got these files. And so what I'd like you to do is you're going to go into pairs. I'll put you in breakout rooms. Yeah, trying to debate. I think I want you in breakout rooms. I think that would be best to work with somebody else. It's going to be random. What you're going to do, okay, is you're going to work together. It's nice if you introduce each other, if you haven't introduced yourselves to your partner, if you've never met them before, especially. It's nice if you turn on your cameras as you work together. One of you will share their screen. You can pass the code back and forth when you're done. But it's best just to work on one thing, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to download the 3 files. There's 3 files, rectangle H, CPP, and main, which are down here at the bottom, okay? You're going to create a Visual Studio project named rectangle. And then what you're going to do is you're going to create the .h, the .cpp for each of these and put them into the appropriate location in the project. So, oops, .h files go in the include folder, .cpp files go in the source folder. Okay. Then what you're going to do is you're going to build and run the project, and it should run correctly, right? Then you're going to uncomment the functions. So that if you'll notice in rectangle.cpp that some functions are commented, you're going to uncomment that. And when you build, you're going to hit some errors. Notice the errors, fix the code. It shouldn't be too bad because you had the solution kind of, actually, if you look carefully on Moodle, the solution's up there for rectangle code. But then this part here is new. What you're going to do then in main is you're going to start creating an array of rectangles. Okay, that is the goal. So, okay, this is what I was worried about. Hang on a second. I'm going to do something on the fly. Okay, can you hear me? I just unplugged because I'm going to move around. I'm going to stop sharing that screen. All right, so I'll walk you through this part. I think it will save time. What I'm doing is I'm moving to the podium computer, which I'm going to move it this way with the keyboard. I'm going to open up Visual Studio, and then I'm going to show you what I'm doing. All right. Let's see. Actually, let me just open. Let me do this. I'm going to minimize this. I need to do it on the podium machine. How do I do it? I want to share my screen. You know, there's so much pressure because like I'm recording this, so it like stays for prosperity. Normally when you teach, this stuff goes away. All right, so can you see that now? All right, so I'm going to create a new project, which if you've used C++, you know how to do that. This is going to be an empty project. And you can see my screen, right? I'm going to name this project, sure, let's call it whatever I said, rectangle example, maybe is the name of it. Doesn't matter, something like that. And then I'm going to create that project. Did it stop sharing? Okay, because it went away, so I'm going to share again. I'll share the Visual Studio window. Okay, so then what you do is you'll notice it's created the project. Now you're on the right hand side under rectangle example, you'll see header and source files, right? So if you right click on header, you're going to add a new item, and it's going to be a .h file or a header file. And we're going to name it the name of the class. So I'm going to name it rectangle.h. Okay. And there it is. Then under source files, I'm going to right click. I'm going to add a new item into C++, and I'm going to name it rectangle.cpp. Okay. Then I'm going to right click. I'm going to add another new item under CPP, and then I'm going to name it main.cpp. So you basically end up with 3 separate files like this, and you can actually arrange, if your screen is big enough, you can arrange all of the files so you can see all 3 at once. I kind of make that one little, and I can then kind of write my .h, write the implementation here in my CPP, and then in main I can be testing. What you're going to do is you're going to look at the files that I've given you, and you can just copy paste whatever is in rectangle.h and paste it here, whatever was in rectangle.cpp and paste it here, and then whatever was in main.cpp and paste it there. And once you've pasted all 3, you should be able to just go build rectangle example, and it should compile. Okay, it should build. When I say build and compile, that's the same thing. Okay. Okay, let's do breakout rooms. I'm going to do probably 10 breakout rooms. Okay, so there's a question. What is the difference between solution and rectangle example? All right, it's complicated. There's a solution is, if you think about it in terms of files, folders, a solution can hold lots of different, a folder can hold lots of different files. A solution can hold lots of different projects. So I can add, if I wanted to, and you will do get this to this, you're just jumping ahead a bit early, is I can add a second project. Okay, let's call it project 1. And so then what I can have is I can have my rectangle project to have a different project. And you can have as many projects as you want in one solution. Okay, just groups them together. And then when you go to the build menu, and oops, wrong one. But if I go to the build menu and I say build solution, that will build all of the projects. But if I go build project, that will just build the one project. Okay. Okay, so I've got my rooms. I'm going to just very quickly swap because the podium gets put in a room, which is nice for the podium, but is not very helpful for the person in that room. Okay, so it's random. I'm just going to open all the rooms. Like I say, introduce yourselves. Oh, if you go to Moodle, there's a group quiz at the end. You just tell me who you worked with, as your individual quiz. So only those of you in my section who you worked with, and basically like how far have you gotten. Okay, and so I'll bring you back probably not in about 25 minutes. Okay, and I'll visit the rooms. So I just have it due in class. It's just basically like I want to see progress. Okay, so it's not based on how far you got.